Okay, let's really sit with this for a second, because this is not a small thing to brush past. Attention doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's not random static in the universe pointing at you for no reason. Human beings are constantly, subconsciously scanning the people around them for signals, confidence, change, energy, growth. And when someone starts giving off a different signal than they used to, people notice, even if they can't always explain why. So if you felt like something has shifted in how people respond to you, that shift is coming from somewhere real, and today we're going to break down exactly what that somewhere is, piece by piece, so you actually understand the mechanics behind what's happening instead of just guessing at it. Maybe it's the way conversations linger a little longer than they used to. Maybe it's the way certain people seem to find reasons to be near you, or the way you've caught someone's attention drift toward you across a room more than once, even when you weren't doing anything in particular to earn it. Maybe it's simply an internal sense, a feeling in your gut that something about how the world is responding to you has quietly recalibrated without a single clear event you can point back to as the cause. Whatever form it's taken for you specifically, the underlying cause is almost always the same, and it has very little to do with luck, timing, or circumstance, and almost everything to do with a shift that already happened inside you first, long before it ever became visible to anyone else. Hey, welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit subscribe and like this video before we get into it. It genuinely helps this content reach more people who need to hear it. If you're already part of this space, welcome back, I'm glad you're here. Before we dive in, one quick reminder like always, take what actually applies to your life right now and let go of what doesn't. Not every single part of this is going to land the same way for every person watching, and that is completely okay. Trust what resonates and leave the rest, and don't force something onto your life just because it sounded good for 2 seconds. This works best when you're honest with yourself about what's actually true for you right now. You've changed, even if you don't fully see it yet. Here's something that happens to almost everyone at some point, and most people are the last to notice it in themselves. Growth is rarely a single dramatic moment. It's usually slow, cumulative, and quiet, small decisions stacked on top of each other over weeks and months, until one day you're simply a different person than you were before. The problem is, because it happens gradually, you often can't see it from the inside the way other people can see it from the outside. They notice the shift in your posture, your tone, the way you carry a conversation, the way you no longer chase things that used to matter to you. You might feel like nothing has changed because you've been living inside the change the entire time, adjusting to it in tiny increments, so gradual they never felt like milestones. But other people don't get that gradual view. They get the before and after, sometimes without even meaning to compare the two, and the contrast is often sharper to them than it could ever be to you. That is exactly why the attention feels different now. You're not imagining a shift, you're simply the last one catching up to something everyone around you has already clocked. Confidence is one of the most detectable signals humans respond to. Social psychologists have studied this extensively, and one of the most consistent findings is that people are remarkably good at picking up on subtle confidence cues, the way someone holds eye contact a little longer, the way they speak without rushing to fill silence, the way they stop over-explaining themselves or apologizing for taking up space. None of this requires a single word being said out loud. It's read almost instantly, often within the first few seconds of an interaction, before a single sentence has even been exchanged, and it fundamentally changes how people categorize you in their minds from that point forward. If you've been building quiet confidence lately, even in small, private ways nobody else witnessed directly, the way you started saying no to things that didn't serve you, the way you stopped explaining decisions you didn't owe anyone an explanation for, it is absolutely showing up in how you move through rooms. And people are responding to that signal whether they consciously realize it or not. Most of them couldn't even tell you what specifically changed. They'd just tell you something feels different about you now, and they'd be right. You stopped chasing, and that changed your entire energy. There's a specific and well-documented psychological pattern where the moment someone stops actively pursuing external validation, stops trying so hard to be noticed, liked, or chosen, they paradoxically become more noticeable. Desperation and neediness create a kind of subtle tension that other people pick up on instinctively, even if they can't name it, and it tends to push people away rather than draw them in, no matter how much effort goes into masking it. The opposite is also true. When you settle into yourself, when you stop performing for approval and start simply existing as you are, that ease reads as magnetic. It's not that you're doing anything more than before. It's that you're doing far less, and less noise means people can actually hear the signal underneath it clearly for the first time. There's a kind of stillness that comes with no longer needing everyone to see your worth, and ironically, that's the exact stillness that makes people look twice. People remember specificity, not averages. One of the most underrated truths about how memory and attraction work together is this: vague, generic impressions fade almost immediately, while specific, distinctive traits stick around in someone's mind long after everything else about that interaction has blurred together. If you have a particular way of laughing, a specific opinion you hold strongly, a distinct way you show up for people when it counts, those are the exact details that lodge in someone's memory long after the interaction ends and everything else fades into the background. You might think you're forgettable because you're not the loudest person in the room, but loud isn't what makes people memorable. Distinct is what makes people memorable, and distinct is something you don't have to perform. You already have it, whether you've recognized it as valuable or not. And if people have been circling back to you, checking in more, bringing you up in conversation when you're not even there, that's usually because something specific about you left an actual imprint, not because of luck, and definitely not because of coincidence stacking up out of nowhere. Your resilience has been more visible than you realized. Whatever you've walked through, the seasons that tested you, the moments where giving up would have been the easier option, none of that went unseen, even when it felt like you were carrying it entirely alone, with nobody checking in to see how heavy it actually was. People are drawn to steadiness, especially the kind that was clearly earned through difficulty rather than handed to someone easily on a good day. There's a reason people are pulled toward those who've been through something real and came out grounded instead of bitter, instead of hardened in a way that pushes people away. It signals capacity, it signals depth, and it quietly tells other people that you can be trusted to handle hard things, which is one of the most attractive qualities a person can have, even if nobody's said that to you directly, and even if you've never once thought of your own hardship as something that could draw people closer instead of pushing them away. Your standards have been doing quiet work behind the scenes. If you've spent recent seasons being more selective about who gets your time, your energy, your trust, that filtering process changes how you show up without you necessarily noticing it in the moment. People who guard their peace tend to carry a kind of calm certainty that's genuinely rare, because most people are still figuring out what they'll tolerate. When you've already done that work, when you know clearly what you will and won't accept, it removes a certain anxious energy that used to be there, and what replaces it is a groundedness that other people can sense almost immediately, even if they can't explain exactly what's different about the way you carry yourself now. The timing of this attention is not random either. Life genuinely moves in cycles, and this applies socially just as much as it applies to anything else. Careers, friendships, opportunities, all of it tends to move in waves rather than a straight line. There are seasons where you're less visible, more internal. more focused on rebuilding quietly behind the scenes where nobody's watching and nothing feels like it's paying off yet. And then there are seasons where all of that internal work starts becoming externally visible, where more opportunities, more connection, and more attention start finding their way to you, almost all at once, sometimes so quickly it feels disorienting after such a long, quiet stretch. If it feels like you're stepping into one of those more visible seasons right now, that's not a coincidence stacking up out of nowhere for no reason. That's the natural, almost mechanical result of everything you've been building, finally becoming visible from the outside after being invisible for longer than felt fair. People are noticing the version of you that shows up when you're not performing. There's a meaningful difference between the polished version of yourself that you present intentionally in situations where you know you're being evaluated, and the version that shows up in unguarded, ordinary moments, the way you talk about something you actually care about when nobody's grading the conversation, the way you treat people when nothing is being observed or rewarded and there's nothing to gain from being kind. That second version is almost always the more compelling one because it's real and people can tell the difference between performance and authenticity even when they can't articulate exactly what tipped them off. If someone has been drawn to you lately, there's a strong chance it's that unguarded version they've caught glimpses of, not the curated one you might assume they're responding to. That's usually the harder version of you to fake, which is exactly why it lands so much deeper when someone catches sight of it. Your consistency is part of what's pulling people in, even if it feels boring from the inside. It's easy to assume that what draws people is something dramatic, a big moment, a bold gesture, a single unforgettable line. In reality, what tends to hold people's attention long-term is the opposite: steadiness, showing up the same way on a hard day as you do on a good one. Following through on the small things you said you would do. Most people are inconsistent without meaning to be, simply because life gets in the way, and when someone encounters a person who is reliably, predictably themselves, it stands out far more than they'd ever admit out loud. If you've been the same grounded version of yourself across different situations lately, that consistency is doing quiet, cumulative work on how people perceive you, even on days that felt completely unremarkable to you. The way you handle setbacks has been more visible than you think. Anyone can look composed when things are going well. What actually gets noticed, remembered, and respected is how someone behaves when something goes wrong, when plans fall apart, when someone disappoints them, when a day doesn't go the way it was supposed to. If you've recently handled a setback with more patience or perspective than you used to, even quietly, even privately, that shift doesn't stay contained to just that one moment. It shows up afterward in how you talk about the situation, in how quickly you're able to move forward instead of staying stuck, and people register that kind of emotional steadiness even when they can't quite name what they're responding to. Even the people who seem distant are paying attention. This one surprises people, but it's consistent across a lot of research on social attention. The people who appear indifferent, or even slightly cold, are frequently the ones tracking you the closest, precisely because indifference takes far less effort to fake than genuine disengagement does. Real, actual disinterest tends to look like true disengagement. No eye contact, no memory of the small details you mentioned once in passing, no reaction either way when your name comes up in a group conversation. What looks like distance is often something else entirely, someone managing their own reaction to noticing you more than they expected to, someone overcorrecting because the alternative feels too exposed. If someone's behavior around you seems oddly inconsistent, warm one moment, guarded the next, that inconsistency is frequently a sign of internal conflict about how much interest to let show, not a sign of true indifference. Comparison is happening whether you can see it or not. People rarely announce when they're measuring one person against another, but it happens constantly, and it happens especially around people who've become a kind of reference point. If someone has recently started holding others to a higher standard, becoming less patient with mediocrity, less willing to settle in conversations or relationships that used to feel fine, there's a decent chance you had something to do with recalibrating what good looks like for them. That's not something people say out loud very often, because it can feel vulnerable to admit that someone else reset your expectations. But it happens more than most people realize, and it's one of the clearest, quietest forms of impact a person can have on someone else without ever knowing it. You are allowed to simply receive this without shrinking it down. A lot of people, when attention starts coming their way, immediately look for reasons to dismiss it. It's probably nothing, they're probably just being nice, I'm probably overthinking this, it'll probably fade in a week anyway. That instinct to minimize good things is common, especially for people who spent a long time being overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel like they were asking for too much just by existing fully. But you don't have to shrink this to make it feel safer or more manageable. You're allowed to simply notice it, sit with it, and let it be true without immediately explaining it away or handing someone else credit for something that started with you. None of this is coincidence, it's cause and effect, just delayed. Everything you've built quietly, every hard season you pushed through without an audience, every small decision to keep growing even when nobody was watching or clapping or checking in on your progress, all of that compounds over time in a way that isn't always visible while it's happening. It doesn't always show results immediately, which is exactly why it can feel sudden when the attention finally arrives, almost like it came out of nowhere, but it was never sudden, not really. It was accumulating the entire time, quietly, patiently, in the background of an ordinary life that nobody was applauding yet, and what you're experiencing now is simply the visible result of work that's been happening under the surface for far longer than anyone around you actually witnessed. So the next time you catch someone's attention lingering a little longer than usual, or notice that a conversation feels different than it used to, or feel that unmistakable sense that something about how people respond to you has shifted, don't rush to explain it away. Don't hand it off to luck or timing or the other person just being unusually generous that day. Let it be what it actually is, the visible, external evidence of internal work you've already done, whether or not anyone ever acknowledged it while it was happening. If any part of this actually landed for you today, whether it was the part about confidence, the timing of it all, the idea that even the distant ones are watching closer than you think, or the part about not shrinking yourself back down, tell me which one hit hardest in the comments below. I genuinely read every single one of them, and it helps me know what to cover next. If this resonated with you at all, do me a favor and like the video before you go, and if you know someone who needs to hear this today, someone who's been quietly wondering if they're imagining all of this, go ahead and send it their way. Subscribe if you want to keep coming back to this space. New videos are dropping every single week, and I promise there's more where this came from. You are not imagining this, you are not overthinking it. This was never a coincidence. I'll see you in the next one.